Hi, I'm Justin Gerard, and I'm doing a quick series about cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, and why people even care about the space. So we just ended off talking about ledgers. We had previously talked about peer-to-peer processing. We talked about, well, why are ledgers important anyway? And now we're going to jump into this concept of, okay, well, I have this distributed ledger. What's it tracking? And so in the case of something like Bitcoin, it's really a proof of concept. The fact that it's worth so much and that it has institutional adoption is quite interesting and funny and humorous, because really Bitcoin is a system where what's tracked on the ledger is your exposure to computation or someone's exposure to computation, and you essentially buy that computation off somebody. So when you buy Bitcoin, you're essentially buying somebody else's empty cycles on their computer. It's a proof of technology, and it has value because we believe it has value. And I think a lot of critics of the cryptocurrency space will say, they'll start to understand shared ledger technology, and they'll say, really cool. They'll look at that. They'll look at the fact that it's used for Bitcoin. They stop there. They lack the imagination to look further into space, into the other assets, and they think, wow, this ledger is just tracking the fact that people ran empty cycles. This is useless. I mean, gold is essentially useless at its price point. So you could make the same comment about why are we mining up gold, and we've been doing that for a very long time. So you can argue all day about what the value is of something we just believe in. Obviously, belief has intrinsic value. We can also take a step past that and talk a little bit about what else can you pack into this computation burden that's occurring on the computer other than empty cycles in order to spit out a Bitcoin. And it turns out that's actually all the other currencies, or most of them. So you have, and I'm going to stop short and I'm going to talk only about projects similar to Ethereum or Matic. And the reason I'm going to do that is because they're sort of what I see as the next step in evolution of this space. And Ethereum, what it did is said, well, instead of running empty CPU cycles to solve a puzzle, what if you did some useful work? Which, don't even get me started, that's what the space was about in the first place. But the idea of this is very transformative, because you have this BitTorrent-like idea, peer-to-peer people sharing, saying, hey, can you grab me a bit of that file? Can you grab me a bit of this file? You have this really cool network. And then you have miners running empty CPU cycles, guessing for the right to get a Bitcoin. But then you do a bait and switch that computation with useful work. So you have this idea that I can submit, much like a BitTorrent file outload or a seeder, like a file seeder, you might be familiar with this idea of seeding a file. You submit your code to the Ethereum network, and you say, hey, I'm going to compensate people with Ethereum to run this job, right? So it's on you to do that. And then what happened, and that's called gas, and what happens is that as people access this resource, instead of them running empty cycles, they're actually running computations for the network and earning ether. And so instead of earning Bitcoin by mining empty CPU cycles, you're actually doing something like verifying bank transactions, baking them down in the blockchain. And if we just for now focus on this idea of smart contracts, not as applications, but as single events. So you might be able to process events like a transaction or a contract closing or a mortgage or an event in your house or a weather event. And you start to imagine that there are many other things that can be quantified with code. Code runs the world right now that can be baked into Ethereum. Now, why is this interesting? Why wouldn't you just write an application and post it up and run on AWS or on GoDaddy, because some people don't know what AWS is? Why wouldn't you just upload this as a website? And some systems you want to act as public services that people pay for themselves. And an example in the future might be internet search. Maybe I don't want to pay with my attention and ads and altered website personality. Like, maybe I don't want to pay for the service by mutating my sense of self. maybe I want to pay for the service by buying some goddamn ether, and then the system will operate and actually give me the information I'm looking for. Maybe I don't want to pay by compromising my identity. And this is an idea that's foundational to the crypto space. If you decentralize a system and put people into the situation where they have to pay for a service, then it's much less likely that the centralization of power is going to encourage people to manipulate and change the masses of people that depend on said technology. So when you think about the concept of ledgers and money, it's easy to see how a centralized authority is going to manipulate ledgers and money to have advantage. Now, thinking about the same thing with content and attention, power structures are already deeply, just think about the marketing and ad market itself. Obviously, this is one of the most valuable parts of the economy. It's what Google is based around. Amazon makes a ton of money prioritizing and deprioritizing products. So this is a very important component of the economy that is pretty nefarious because it doesn't usually have the user in mind. It has the products in mind. So this shift to a distributed computation model ensures that on a case-by-case basis, the network as a public utility that you pay for only ever has the person using the utility in mind. And this is a foundational shift that's going to change the nature of the internet when services are built on top of smart contracts. So this is where people start to have this, when they start to understand what Ethereum is, they start to have an explosive mind-altering experience. And this is why in the market we saw people jump into Bitcoin, and then we saw insane gains in derivative assets and the sort of real, or I don't want to say real assets, but assets that do work after, like Ethereum, because they realized, oh my God, this is a paradigm shift on the internet, and when this team nails it, and they haven't nailed it, this is going to become the definition of the internet for future generations, and this is what people see. Whether or not Ethereum's the winner, or a company like Matic's the winner, and there are other ones as well, remains to be seen. But certainly these public resources and public systems are going to completely change what we think of computation, and I'm excited to see what companies are around in 2 years. So now thinking all the way back, well, what is this Bitcoin, what is this cryptocurrency craze? Is just betting on coins. You can start to understand that distributing computation away from centralized authorities and treating it as a public resource is a huge paradigm shift, and it has a huge benefit for regular people, which is part of why the crypto space is important for regular people to support and not denigrate. So that's, and when you're thinking about what's the value of this computation, you got to think about some of the business models it disrupts and the expense that it takes to run those business models. So one of the big challenges right now with Ether is that it's quite expensive, and it's not very computationally efficient. But these problems are being addressed by well-capitalized teams that are racing towards solving this problem. The same way, 20 years ago, when the internet was on, the internet transitioned from dial-up to high speed, and websites went from looking like hot garbage to being interactive 3D experiences very, very quickly. So we can expect the same pace of innovation in this space. So the next thing up is talking about exchanges and value exchanges. So I'm going to do that next, but you might want to bake on this idea of distributed computation and look at some of the systems you depend on, such as banking systems, websites, and systems that currently are abused when centralized, and think about what would it look like if it was decentralized and you had to pay per use. What would that feel like? How would that operate, and how would the economy operate? And you're going to start to get a sense of the latent value in this space.